we are live.
Okay, hello and welcome to the fifth Holacracy Practitioners Meetup. This time in the form of a webinar organized by Boldare, which is formerly known as XSolve Chilid. My name is Carolina and I'll have a pleasure of hosting this webinar tonight. Just before we kick off, a couple of words about us, about the meetup and tonight's speakers. To give you a bit of a background, Boldare is a digital product design and development company which emerged from combining the power and experience of XSolve and Chilid. We adopted Holacracy 1 year ago and decided to share and exchange knowledge about the transformation process and practical advice other companies can apply on their journey. And this is how Holacracy Practitioners Meetup was born. Since then, we had the pleasure of hosting 4 meetups in our offices in Gliwice and Warsaw, with over 600 participants in attendance online and here in our HQ. And what we're particularly proud of is that we've managed to convince 2 other companies to adopt Holacracy. So the good word is spreading. During tonight's webinar, we'll discuss Holacracy 5.0, namely changes in the constitutions. Tonight's speakers feature Sascha Bernardis from Dwarfs and Giants, who will discuss how to set up practices supporting tribe space and how this will help your organization prepare for 5.0. Chris Cowan from HolacracyOne with a presentation titled Holacracy 5.0, and Bartek Żydek-Tomecki from Boldare with a presentation Holacracy 5.0, Why You Might Be Already There. Welcome and thank you for joining us, guys. Dear viewers, we encourage you to post your questions during the lectures, and our speakers will answer them at the end of each slot. We ask you to post your questions in a questions tab on your right-hand side. If you have any technical difficulties, you'd like to share your thoughts about what you hear, or just to say hi, please post in the chat tab also on your right. We encourage you to post live on Twitter during the webinar. The hashtag is HolaMeetup. And you can tag us at Boldare so we can retweet your content. So without further ado, let's start. I would like to introduce our first speaker, Sascha Bernardis from Dwarfs and Giants. Sascha is evolutionary catalyst of the first hour of Dwarfs and Giants. And Dwarfs and Giants is an innovative organizational design and strategizing consultancy. Dwarfs and Giants is a lab itself for next practices and a European hub for self-organization that supports the transformational journey towards next generation organizations. Sascha works with international organizations and corporations like Veleda, Swisscom, and Freitag. Sascha started his work life as a social worker, but built up and developed social businesses for more than 10 years. He also lectured at various universities and is co-creating transformational processes with his clients by entering the consulting business since 2007. Tonight, he will discuss how to set up practices supporting tribe space and how this will help your organization prepare for 5.0. Sascha, welcome.
Hello, and thank you very much for the invitation to the whole Boldare team. It's awesome to be here with you, and I just try to share my screen now. Let's see how this works out. And we can get started in a second. Okay. Seems like it doesn't work that way with the PDF, so I have to go back to the PowerPoint presentation. Just a moment. Good. All right. You will see the presentation not in the normal presentation mode because it's technically not possible, but let's see. Okay, right. I was asked first to give a speech or some insights on an organization can move smoothly from 4.2 to 5.0. And I was taking on this task and realized, oh, there is too much anticipation in it. And I just had a call with a few friends and guys who are very deep into Holacracy. And we figured out, hey, there is no check from reality, how we can speak about that, how to smoothly go there without having been there. So it would have been all about anticipation. So what I did then is to say, okay, let's look how tribe space apps and how tribe space formats might be helpful also to tackle issues that come up within Constitution 5.0. But I have to say, it doesn't mind in which constitution we are working in. Tribe space is always an important topic. But I picked out 3 topics, and maybe Chris can add later on his speech to these issues if they are still there or solved, or if they are issues. But we see that if you look, there are some small observations I've done. First, I've seen that the role supporter, which is supporting a role, might seduce to legitimate some management hierarchy. So it can create some confusion between working on eye level to have a system like role supporter. The idea is awesome, I like it, but if you transist to this system, or if you start with Holacracy, you might have also the issue that people are quite into who are still into management hierarchy, are seduced not to go with Holacracy attitudes that are important to shift to Holacracy, or to fall back, for example, if you already started to implement Holacracy, to old behavior. That might be an issue, but to be honest, anticipated. Then there is a second interesting issue that, as you know, in Constitution 5.0, every role is already a circle. And what to do if you have a multified role, and who decides on the development of the circle? So at the moment, I haven't found anything within the Constitution, maybe it's there, how you get the proper decision just to create roles within the circle. Imagine you have a multi-field role, two partners who have different focuses, and one of them wants to create some more roles and the other does not want to. Governance is not a must at this moment. So that might be easily solved, because if you don't have a governance, it might seduce you also to get into a consens mode. So actually, I don't know HolacracyOne has solved this issue. Maybe it's already solved, but then Chris Cowan can tell something more about that. And what I also got is that the facilitator might also be allowed to redirect the participant of a governance meeting during a reaction round if he is anticipating too much into the future and is not grounded in reality here, which might be a kind of different approach to a sacred space like a governance meeting. For sure, you know this language of spaces format. We have different spaces within organizations. We have the organizational space and we have the individual context. The organizational context and the individual context. In the organizational context, we have the governance space and we have the operational space, which is, of course, defined by Holacracy, and we have the relational space and the individual space, where we have some more concrete hints within Constitution 5, but actually not so really the clue, by purpose, of course, how to use these spaces in a proper way. So within our implementation practices, and when I look on the practices of Dwarfs and Giants and how we work with clients, the relational space and the individual space are very important when you go for self-organization, like Holacracy or within a holacratic structure. So I want to become very concrete on tribe space formats here, and there are three pathways which we experienced were very important if you run a system, an operating system like Holacracy. And they are important levers, possible levers as I mentioned here, to more trust and self-responsibility. So the question is, how does an organization learn beyond tactical meetings and governance meetings and being strong in roles and have clarity on roles and have the tools and the possibilities to develop the structure of the organization. I'm sure all Holacracy practitioners of you have experienced there is something beyond clarity in roles. There are relational issues you have between partners. There is someone who annoys you, how he is not doing or doing things which are important for you, where you have the maybe the tension that beside the fact that there is clarity.
Sascha, can you hear me?
Yes?
I just want to interrupt. Sorry, I know you're in a flow, but I don't are moving. So I think everyone, we still just see the title.
Oh, okay. That's not so fine. Thank you for telling me that.
Yeah, no problem.
Chris.
So I think screen sharing is not quite working. That's not so good at this moment. Actually, I don't know what to do. So I just have to go through in a different way. Let's
Chris,
see.
if you click on, sorry, Sascha, if you click on the left-hand side, on the second slide, maybe, no?
On the...
Yeah, on the left-hand side, you have...
in the presentation.
Yeah.
It's working now?
No, it's not working. No.
Good.
So I guess we're gonna have to go without the presentation. Sorry for that, guys.
Yes, no, it's, yeah. I will send it anyway afterwards, so you will get the presentation and just take some notes and yeah, let's go for it in a different way. So I try to be more clear on what I'm saying. So there are three pathways you can go to support development on a relational and on the individual space. So first is solve relational issue between partners. Second is create room for presence that strengthens strength and allow to learn. And third, get clarity on dynamics and patterns within your team and your organization. First, when it's about solve relational issues between partners, do clear the air meetings. Unfortunately, you now can't see the awesome presentation I've done, but when it's about it's about when my relationship to a partner is disturbed and makes it difficult to work together because something happened beyond the clarity on the governance structure. Something is not working out in the relationship. For example, what's a typical relation? What's a typical thing? People might not deliver, might not be transparent on things they are responsible for. It's difficult to hold people accountable and so on. And there is nothing which is unclear till this moment within the operational and the governance space. So how you can do this? For example, we sit together in a circle and we have intense check-in, and then we take up the relational tensions. So for example, I have a tension with a partner. Then I'm invited by the facilitator to tell about what I want to be heard of from another partner. So I state where I have the issues in the relationship. What do I feel? What does it do with me? Where do I struggle? What examples do I have? What do I observe in the relationship? And the other partner is just invited to listen. And if I'm finished, the facilitator asks the partner to repeat what he has heard from me, or what she has heard from me. And then I get the chance to add some topics or to support with more clarity on what I want to be heard of. And if this part is over, so it's sometimes it's going some rounds, and if I have the feeling that I'm heard in what I want to be heard of, then it goes the other way around, and the other partner has the possibility to provide resonances and also feelings and explanations maybe to this issue. And then I'm the one who has to listen. And this goes so many rounds till both partners have the feeling they are heard in what's important to them. And then you can define maybe a next step for a proper solution. So normally the emotional tensions really go down quite awesome in this process. Because if you are forced to listen and you have to give back what you have heard, this is a good tool in communications to bring out emotional tensions quite fast. So our experiences with that is it's about relation. We call it clear the air meeting, which mean when you come into a room and the air is poisoned, with this meeting you have the possibility to open up the windows and the bad air is going out. So that's the metaphor behind it. We use non-violent communication as a basic and as an attitude for these meetings. After we have worked through all tensions that are possible, all relational tensions that are possible within this meeting, we go on with the appreciation round. And after the appreciation round, we go for a round on personal challenges. These are optionals. Normally in such meetings, you face personal challenges, and it's good to share them, to have them transparent. And then after that, it's about checkout and harvesting. So this is about when something is going wrong in the relationship of two partners. which are not governance tensions and operational tensions. Second, I told you, create room for presence that supports to strengthen your strength and allow to learn. What does it mean? Create space for peer-to-peer feedback. And how does it work within DG or in organizations from clients we work with? It's quite simple. First, you bring in all roles of a partner into the room. So, for example, you have 10 partners, and every partner has a space on the wall where all his roles are around his name. So all roles are printed out and they are there. And the first step is, it's about the sequence of 45 minutes. You go to every partner, look on the roles, and you give feedback on how I experience you within your roles to serve the purpose of the organization. Where do I see strength and where do I see development? It's not about, and that's quite important to have a difference here, it's not about the relationship. It's not about tensions I have in the relationship. It's just things I observe and which is the present I give to the person, fulfilling the purpose of different rules that serve the organizations and of course the circles purpose. It's done, you can do it in different ways. You can, if you have time enough, you can do it within a circle, or you can do it within the whole organization. That just has to be figured out. So that's the first part of it, 45 minutes, you write down on Post-its your feedback. Second round is also around 45 minutes. You sit in the circle and you can ask a partner, you gave me the feedback, this or that. What is this feedback exactly upon? Can you give me more information on this? So this allows to get more specific on the written down feedbacks. And the other thing I can do in this round is to say, okay, I have given you a feedback and I want to add some context for you. And after this 45 minutes round is over, you also go into, you have the option to go into appreciation round. That's one possibility. And the other possibility is what we normally do. What are the strengths I discover where I feel strengthened? And what are the developments I want to see? And what might be a next action I want to take away for my own development? And then you go into a checkout round reflecting on how this peer-to-peer feedback work. We normally develop also evolutionary this format. But it's a standard format where you can work with and that supports you to get some trust or to foster trust within the tribe. And the third dimension or the third pathway, which has become very important for us, is doing team coaching, which allows to get clarity and good pictures, hypotheses on dynamics and patterns within the team. Sometimes it's about fear of processing tension, what might be behind here. For example, we in Dwarfs and Giants can be transparent on that quite easily. We have 4 founders and we have people who joined Dwarfs and Giants later on. So beside the fact that we have I think, quite developed holacratic structure. And I suppose you can call our practice quite mature. We have an issue here in our tribe space, and it's quite important to get clarity. What is the pattern here behind? What are the dynamics? What might make it difficult to tackle some issues? What's the culture we have developed here? What's the specific thing on this culture? And to what kind of behavior does it lead? Because if you go to different holacratic organizations, you will observe some similar patterns regarding meeting practices or vocabulary, but on the other side, you might discover different cultures, how people behave within or beside these meetings. So this is something you cannot solve in a clear the air meeting, or you cannot solve within a peer-to-peer feedback. For this, you need special meeting. We do normally team coachings 1 day, 5 times a year. And that's quite easy for a small organization. For a larger organization, that's quite difficult to set up the right container. Maybe it might be a circle. Maybe it might be important to bring together different circles. This is something you have to find out if you want to set up a group coaching. It has its limits when the group becomes too large. Then it might be a different approach you have to work here with to get clarity on dynamics and patterns. For this, it might be important to develop different approaches. So I figure time is over now. It's 18:30, and now it's about to answer questions. I hope I have been clear on the issues without the presentations. A little bit difficult to get clarity on the methods, but now I'm open for your questions.
Cool. Thank you so much, Sascha. Once again, I'm really sorry for the technical difficulties. So now we move on to questions. Guys, just a quick reminder, you can post your questions now, either in chat or in questions on your right-hand side. And we have one question now from Patricia. How do you manage situations? Sorry. Well, once again, how do you manage situations when someone is bringing personal emotional tensions to role feedback space?
Okay. I think if you write it down on the Post-its and it's there, and I get such a feedback, I might bring it up in the circle when we sit together, what's meant by it. And then the facilitator has the chance to say, okay, maybe this is attention for a clear the air meeting, and it's not a feedback here that's baked here inside. That's a possibility the facilitator has here, or we have to figure it out.
Could you clarify what does clear the air meeting means?
A clear the air meeting is the meeting I mentioned before, when you have an issue on within the relationship to a partner. It's not about the feedback on what are you good at and what might be a development. It's when I really have a relational tension with another partner because he, let's say, somehow rude, he pisses me off. This has nothing to do in a feedback session, and it's very important to have a clear difference between what is a feedback and what is attention for a clear the air meeting. And of course, if you have more tensions coming in, you also can use checkout round, which is I think a very powerful thing, which is often in Holacracy underestimated to get clear what's helpful for such a meeting and what's not helpful. And in a checkout round, I could say, okay, awesome that we had some relational tensions here, but that might not be the space for solving them. So that's more for clear the air meeting. And I would like to have the organization or the partners to have more clarity on the differences, for example. So this is also space for learning.
One more question from Asha. What is the most difficult partner to deal with which ruins building tribe space and good organizational culture? Sorry, pattern. What is the most difficult pattern to deal with which ruins building tribe space and good organizational culture?
That's awesome, because that goes along with what's not helpful for holacratic organization. It's not processing tensions. It's fear of processing tensions. It's about taboos, and it's about I experienced this now in an organization. They called me because they started dealing with holacracy, and we had a first talk about that. And it's when, for example, the founder team tells, because they had no proper support, when they say, okay, we have some issues now, and for example, entrepreneurship and fast decisions are more important than rules and holacratic structure, which is complete nonsense, because the message here is the old power structure is still in charge and is still important, and that makes it difficult for people to process the tension. So you really need, if you go into holacracy, people from the former management hierarchy that show vulnerability, and that they have to keep as a to the rules of holacracy. And of course, they have role model how to be vulnerable and how to give and receive feedback, and that it's possible to solve tensions. If you make a taboo around tensions, also on the relational space, it's become very difficult and painful. And that's why it's important for me, as my experience, if you want to go for holacracy, it's important to look how is the capacity of the organization to solve tensions, or to address tensions at least. And maybe before you start implementing the structure, maybe it's more important to practice feedback and clear the air capacities, because that might ease the that might support the capacity to bring up tension also in a holacratic meeting. So I would say that might be difficult patterns.
Thank you very much, Sascha. That's all for in terms of questions from the audience. Thank you, and I would like to now introduce Chris Cowan from HolacracyOne. He's going to be our next speaker. And Chris, could you join us? Thank you. Thank you very much, Sascha. Brilliant. And Chris is an accomplished consultant and leadership development expert. He joined HolacracyOne after seeing the limits of many traditional leadership development approaches that fail to address underlying organizational norms and power structures. Chris sees holacracy as a particular tool for clarifying decision-making authority, which dramatically reduces politics while allowing individual creative expression. He has worked with a wide variety of commercial, nonprofit, and governmental clients on their manager training programs, and has taught graduate courses in leadership at Harvard University and Georgetown University. And now you will hear from Chris about Holacracy 5.0. Chris, welcome, and over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was a great intro. Yeah, and I'll be able, I think, to build and connect into some of the stuff that Sascha was talking about, which is kind of exciting for me. So yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. I think the goal of my presentation is to give everybody an overview of the major changes that are expected for Constitution version 5. Now, if we've got more time, we can go into some of the smaller, maybe interesting changes, but I really wanted to hit what I consider to be the big ones. And let me just share my screen here and get this going. And again, please use the question functionality here, this tool, because of Livestorm, because it would be great to be able to tailor, some of the information to specific tensions that people have. Again, my intent is to kind of give a survey, which hopefully might even leave more time for questions. Okay, let's go ahead and dive into it. The first thing I want to say about Constitution version 5, there's kind of two big caveats. The first one is that it's still preliminary. I'm not in the role that's doing all these updates, although I've taken a lot of individual action to kind of help and dive into issues. So that's the first one. It's still preliminary, so these things could change. The second big caveat is that I think the major growth areas for practice with Holacracy is not the change in the Constitution. It's a fuller, more authentic integration of the human, the cultural pieces that Holacracy itself does not focus on, but also does not intend to exclude from the organizational life of us as human beings. So there's a lot of work there, of course. That's not what we're talking about today. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just focusing on the Constitution and the changes, but you'll see, I think, where even some of the human and the cultural pieces are helping shift, I think, what is included in the kind of the core rule set. I kind of summarize the things that are new here in three ways. It's going to be a little bit more flexible. Sascha mentioned at the beginning this idea of a role supporter. So I'm going to talk about that, and we can kind of get into other ways. I think it's more flexible, more human. We're going to look at a very specific section that has been added around working agreements, which are partner-to-partner agreements, not role-to-role agreements, just human-to-human, partner-to-partner agreements. And then more distributed. And the most compelling way I think that shows up is by removing the default authority of a lead link to allocate resources. So that's a big change. And we're going to go into each of these. We're going to look at the section, and I'm going to try to help kind of give you a conceptual way of thinking about it. And then we'll just take it from there with questions. Okay. So first things first. This new type of role. So I've got here the two new sections, 1.2 and 1.23. 1.2 talks about a role, and now kind of what you think about a normal role in the previous version will now be called a role lead. You don't need to kind of read all of this. I'm certainly not going to read it to you. I just want to kind of show you that it's there in 1.2 and 1.23. So you can look it up if you're not already familiar. You can go to GitHub, or you can just search in the search field, GitHub, Holacracy Constitution, and you can see the development version of this. So that's where this comes from. So that's the role lead. And then there's this other kind of weird new type of role called a role supporter. And as a partner, when you serve as a role lead for a role, again, that's the one above, you may assign other people to fill the role as well as role supporters. And you may remove these assignments at any time. So what does that mean? So I'm going to do my best here to try to kind of have this make sense. Okay, so think of a role just like you would normally think of a role, right? And in the current version of the Constitution, kind of what is defined for you outside of governance, right? The governance of your role gives you all the specific, accountabilities, the purpose, domain, what have you. Regardless of the specifics of that, every role filler has this list of things. They have a set of responsibilities and they have a set of duties. Yeah, thanks, Patricia, for putting that link on GitHub. Yeah, so they've got all that stuff. The responsibilities are the things you need to be thinking about: processing tensions, processing your purpose and accountabilities, considering what would be a fuller manifestation of that purpose and accountability, breaking down projects, tracking projects and next actions, prioritizing attention. Each one of these has a specific subsection. And then there are also duties, and the difference there is responsibilities are kind of what you're kind of taking, what you're responsible for yourself, right? These are things you need to be doing on your own. And then the duties are defined as things that you need to, your responsibilities to others. So there's a duty for transparency, for making your tracking list clear, processing messages from others, and prioritizing. Okay. So now think of that for the time being as a role lead. They're essentially the same thing. So now there's a role lead, and this role supporter thing is kind of splitting off and reducing the amount of stuff that a role filler would actually have to worry about. So you'll see here I crossed off processing tensions, processing purpose and accountabilities. As defined in the Constitution, they don't need to be thinking in terms of a fuller manifestation of the role. You can think of this almost like, I'll give you a concrete example. So part of the reasons that led to this, Brian Robertson is in the Constitution steward role. So he's the one who's gathering data and vetting and trying to figure out how to make the updates in the Constitution, right? Well, I've been taking a lot of individual action to help him essentially with that role. And it's all been under individual action. And I haven't, created a role for that. I haven't felt attention about it. It's fine. Well, that is a case for creating a role supporter that I would be in. I would be a role supporter of that role. And so I wouldn't have to be I don't have all of the responsibilities that a normal role filler has, right? I just have kind of almost like specific assignments, right? So there's tracking projects and next actions. I can kind of follow the direction somewhat of a role lead. So in this case, Brian's like, hey, I need help with this specific thing. I could still turn and, say, no, I'm not interested or what have you, or prioritize it differently and all of that. But I'm not, again, like having to regularly review and consciously consider how to better manifest this role's purpose in the world. And that's also true of just some roles, right? Some roles kind of have that character to them. You need to really be kind of oriented in the purpose and what they're going for. But then other roles, sometimes it's just one very clear, concrete accountability, and that's it. There's no purpose. It's just one specific concrete function that needs to be done on a regular basis, right? The feel is very different between those two things. There's not really much to consider consciously and review and think of a better manifestation. So it's kind of similar. So the role supporter has a reduced set of responsibilities. And then the duties, I left them here in gray because they are still there, but only apply to the role lead, if that makes sense. So there are duties for transparency and messages, what have you, but that duty only applies to the role lead. I only need to process messages from the role lead as it relates to that work. I only need to worry about, have a duty to be transparent to a role lead if requested by a role lead, not others. So it kind of gets me out of some of the other flow of information and requests that others are having, right? It kind of allows me to be a little bit behind the scenes. And I think it could be extraordinarily helpful. Sascha mentioned one of the concerns, is like what this may do to different power dynamics. I think that's a really great question. I'm not sure. My sense is that the supporter piece, if that ends up feeling like a step backwards, because it's more like, it's more like administrative, or you're more just helping somebody else. I think that's probably offset by the fact that everybody who has just a normal role is now a role lead. So if you're a supporter somewhere, you're also going to be a lead somewhere, right? So there's that lead role is going to also be included, and everybody will have that. And I can say more about that in the questions, but it's an extraordinarily interesting kind of way of doing it. So that's what that's about. Again, if you have questions, which I would imagine you do, please chat them in. The next kind of big piece is what I call kind of the more human bit is working agreements. Now, I am going to read a little bit of this. So this is a new section in Constitution 5 that states that the organization's partners may now make working agreements about how they will interact with each other to fulfill those general functions as partners. And the agreements are for shaping partner behaviors, and that's an important word, behaviors, and may not define expectations only when a partner is energizing a specific role. The reason for that, of course, is because those expectations are defined in the roles, defined in the governance, defined in the Constitution. So this is something outside of all of those things. And again, that last line of that first part, working agreements may only specify concrete acts to do or behavioral constraints to honor. And the behavioral constraints piece, and I'm going to give you some examples here in just a moment, is a really important component here. So instead of trying to get agreement around like certain principles or certain values, which ultimately, I don't know, I think it's a fine intent. It's just in practice, it's easy to have a disagreement about what manifests the value of fairness, right? You're still going to have conflicts about what the thing that someone did as not being a manifestation of fairness. In order to do that, though, you have to look at what they did, right? Something happened. They did something that you're then connecting to the value. So the purpose here is to help define, without needing somebody to necessarily agree in principle or on my values, right? Or have some sort of alignment philosophically, I can just focus on the concrete behavior and see if I can make a request around that would kind of make my life more wonderful, right? Kind of to use some language from, as Sascha mentioned, nonviolent communication, right? Like a way in which someone could make my life more wonderful. And being very concrete about that, right, allows that the normal human desire to help others, it helps liberate that because there's a concrete thing I can do versus I would love to help you, but I'm having to try to figure out all the ways that I can help you or what may actually be help for you. So let's look at some of these examples. I took these from our current working agreements ledger in Holacracy One. And again, these are partner to partner. So a partner brings this up and then asks others to agree to it, and then we document that. So here's one. I will prioritize attending the organization's partner retreats in person, even over competing personal preferences or events. And then there's some other specifics there about what that means. So this is to try to get some sense of alignment around the prioritization of attending partner retreats. And we don't attend partner retreats. Holacracy One's virtual, so we're spread out. And we need to come together to be physically in the same location every 2 months or so. And it could be pretty costly energetically, on partners. And so, there's nothing in the governance that we can do around that. Partners don't have a direct channel. There might be something in a partner agreement that says in general, I would agree to prioritize retreats. That's fine too. So that's an example here of, and then asking partners, do you agree to it? And they don't have to agree, right? It's a free choice. Let me give you some others. Another one, I agree to prioritizing attending a clearing conversation upon request from another partner. So again, Sascha was talking about like an intense check-in or a clearing conversation of some sort. And if you have an expectation that's a really important thing to do, I really want someone, if I feel like that needs to happen, I want them to prioritize that, competing against their work and say, hey, this is really important. Then I want to ask people to make that prioritization, which also means then if someone says they can't attend, right, and they've agreed to that, or they're not willing to, and they've agreed to this, then that gives me an opportunity to check in with them and say, okay, I just want to check in. You've agreed to prioritizing that. So, were you not aware of that, or do you want to change that agreement, right? And then see what they say. Another example, when planning to take time off from work, I can reasonably expect that others will be impacted by my absence. then I can agree to notify all relevant parties in advance. Right? Some of these things, again, almost seem so obvious. And in general, they are. I would say that the goal here isn't to write down every possible, again, intellectually, to think through it. It's when an actual concrete tension surfaces. And the cool part about it is it can be one-to-one. In other words, we don't need the entire partnership. If I, and I have some here actually coming up, that I made that, if I want someone to agree to it, it could just be one specific person, from one specific case. And I said, yeah, can you agree to this going forward? And see what they say. We get to have an interesting conversation about it. And that's where you'll see to the right there, agreed, and some empties, right? That's the kind of the leisure we're keeping of who's agreed to what. Okay. So these next two, yeah, so here's another one. This was about complaining. So there was, culturally some weird issues with like weird reactions actually to partners kind of complaining, right? Not any specific thing. They weren't asking anybody to change anything. They weren't making any requests. I don't know. It wasn't really quite clear. There's a lot of value in complaining and there's some bad versions of it. So this was an agreement that I had requested for others. When I complain about a work or partnership issue, I agree to explicitly state that I am not making any requests of the audience. Example, I just need an event. And if I am, I agree to make requests clear and explicit, right? So now I'm going to do my best to adhere to this agreement. If I just kind of am just complaining, catch myself, right? And I can clarify, hey, I just need to vent for a second. You don't need to change anything. No one needs to do anything necessarily. I just need space, right, to kind of think this out. Now, that's only, I would say, so good. The other part here, I think, is equally important, which is a responsibility or a duty for someone listening, right? So this says, when another partner is complaining to me about a work or partnership issue, I agree to ask non-reactive clarifying questions about the intent. So are you looking for advice or what have you? So if I can, as working with other people, if individuals agree to both of these, then we have some shared responsibility around this old issue of like an awkwardness around someone complaining and it not being clear who's supposed to be doing what. So if you're just listening to somebody complain and you're kind of secretly judging them, well, then you're not adhering to this last agreement, which is you've agreed to actually clarify that for yourself, right? To ask them, right? So they're owning the responsibility to try to speak it. You're owning the responsibility to clarify it on your end. So these are some examples, and we've got a huge list and growing, and it's worked pretty well. I often have found we don't need to rely on it, like go back to it and say, hey, you agreed to this, but you didn't do it. That I haven't encountered that. Maybe once I've encountered that in, I don't know, 2 years, a year and a half, maybe we've been trying this. Mostly it seems the value comes out of some of the initial conversation and around agreement, either crafting the agreement, someone's thinking through the practice almost of trying to figure out, okay, something happened, something pissed me off. What concretely could I request of somebody, right? Like what could I concretely request of them? That practice can be good. And then when you ask somebody to agree to it and they have to think about it and maybe they say no. Well, great. That's an opportunity to have a conversation about it, right? Why not? What would you agree to, right? To try to figure it out without having to play a lot of games or make up, ungenerous stories about each other in our heads. All of which, of course, may still happen and probably will still happen. Having a pathway like this could alleviate some of that. So this is an example of like how the Constitution, I think, is including a little bit more. But like I said, the Constitution itself is certainly not going to be everything that you're going to need to be able to manage this all, I think, well. Yeah, it is a lot of agreements. It's a lot of agreements, but again, they don't necessarily have to be for all partners. Again, it could just be one-to-one, and you could ask other people to agree and see. So that's number 2. And I'm paying attention to the chat as we're going. So any of the hosts, if I'm short on time, just send me a message in there. That will be helpful. Otherwise, I'll just kind of go with my intuition where I am on time. Cool. So lastly, the last kind of big thing is removing the authority around lead links for allocating resources. That is not a small thing. Now, it was, I think, it was kind of a complete disaster. That's an overstatement. It was very confusing to try to understand how a lead link had resource allocation authority. If you didn't already kind of put this together, a lead link has no domain on resource allocation, has no domain of resources. And in a way, right, like as you're learning to practice or practicing holacracy, you're really oriented around accountabilities, you're really oriented around policies, you're really oriented around domains, right? And if there's no domain or policy restricting it or, rule against it, right, you should be able to do it. The problem is the restriction around kind of getting rid of assets in the old version of the Constitution. I mean, it's there, and it's the part that all of the resource allocation hinges on as it cascades down lead link to lead link. But it's not very clear. It took me a long time to even be able to answer that question well about where is it captured in the Constitution. So now a couple of things are happening. One, it's clearer in the language here. And secondly, by removing it from the lead link, I think some real interesting power shift stuff can happen. So the current versioning of this is under 2.1.3, which just says don't dispose of assets. This falls under, I think, a responsibility of role filling or restrictions of role filling. And it just says now, right, you may not spend any money, yada, yada, yada. And then here it kind of gives like a basic, I would almost call it like an app, a governance app for like historically, it's what we would call an app, is almost like now encoded at a very base level, which says that actually by default now with version 5, anyone can get authorization by simply announcing their intent to spend in writing to all circle members of a circle that already has the right to spend the money or assets. In other words, it still has to cascade down, right? A circle can only spend the money that it's been given permission to spend, and then circle, roles within that circle only able to spend from that budget. So that's still there. And the statement must include a reason for the spending and the role you're acting in. A few other now restrictions, right? That's a pretty big power to just hand out. So therefore, you need to have a reasonable time frame for others to consider the potential expense before proceeding. And any of them may block your ability to proceed by escalating the expense for additional consideration. And then once escalated, a circle lead link of that circle may further assess and choose the reverse of the escalation. So if you're going to follow that logic there, by default now, anyone could express the intent to spend. Anyone can then escalate that intent to spend. And if it is escalated, okay, well, then it kind of goes back to the way it was before. Now the lead link is going to have to make a judgment call one way or the other. So that's very different. But it is something that we've been doing in Holacracy One for quite a while. And I can give you a bit of an example here. So we have a specific Slack channel, which we call Spending Off. And I just grabbed one from, I don't know when this was, yesterday. It was yesterday that Rebecca made. And you'll see kind of an example of how it's structured. At channel as Holacracy Forum and Forum Tech, the roles that she's speaking from. I intend to spend $1,099 on the Forum 2019 app. And then she gives some of the reasoning, right? That's also part of what's in the Constitution. Currently, in Holacracy One, we have this as a policy in governance. But it's actually split out in our governance. It's this base level policy, which is exactly what the new version of the Constitution would have, right? Those almost are identical. And then we have a couple others actually that are added on top of that add additional rules for different spending amounts. So again, you can always add, of course, onto this and further clarify. And it includes what? I intend to use it more robustly. Yeah, it includes, and then she ends it, which is really a nice little thing that she added, and I welcome clarifying questions and reactions. And then she has to give a reasonable amount of time for people to review that, ask questions, consider it. And then by default, if those questions are answered and no one is escalated, then she has the authorization to spend the money. Cool. All right, so those are the big three. quickly, I'm going to review them. I wish I had a slide on it, but the big three were the role supporters and role leads. That's going to be a really interesting change. There's the working agreements. That's going to be an interesting change. I can say more about why I think that's so important. And then the lead link and the spinning off, kind of base level spinning off authorization being baked into the Constitution. I'll kind of do a quick kind of teaser by just highlighting some of the other smaller things that have changed that I'd be happy to answer questions on, or if we have time, we could even look at. No more crosslinks, that's going away. A policy may change this is now going to be further clarified so that it's more obvious in the Constitution what are you allowed to change. So in Constitution 4.1, there was occasions of the Constitution saying, here's like the default tactical meeting process, but a policy may change that, right? It would actually say that in the Constitution. The problem with that is, I don't know, you still have to kind of interpret what that would mean for the rest of the bits. Like, what if a part of the Constitution didn't say that? Does that necessarily mean I can't change it? A little confusing. So in the new version of the Constitution, anything that kind of by default is allowed to be changed without needing any sort of constitutional amendment. It's just something that you can do in governance, will be called out, and it will say a policy may change this and give whatever additional criteria, if any, may be needed. And it shows up, I don't remember, one of my projects is reviewing that and seeing where it might be needed. I think there's at least 5 or 6 different places that shows up, which should be good. Timeout is actually defined now in the meetings. This is an example of something that we just have, I think everyone has done. We've just done from the beginning almost as part of the practice and learning and facilitation, right? It's just always been there, this thing called timeouts, but never actually written down in the Constitution that that's a thing to do. So that's in there. Objection tests, the objection criteria number 3 is a little bit different. If you remember, for those of you who are facilitators or just have a lot of practice experience, the criterion is around whether it's based on presently known data or if someone is anticipating. So that will be a little bit clearer. I'm particularly fond of that change. It'll just make it a little bit clearer. Happy to talk about that. And then another kind of similar to the timeouts, there's this bit in 2.1 that starts off and it just clarifies. It just says, essentially, you have, as a role filler, you have the full authority to make any decision or take any action in your role to serve your purpose or accountabilities, as long as it doesn't break a rule. And if that sounds somewhat familiar, that's because it's a really kind of good prompt or phrase to use, and it's used a lot in trainings. I use it, in coaching and practice and stuff. It's a great phrase to use, but again, it hasn't really been written down, and was a bit of a shame. So that is now in the Constitution. It just starts off on that section around duties and responsibilities to say, to orient kind of a user to say, baseline, this is the rule. You have this full authority. And then now here are some constraints in role filling. And then, of course, the Constitution in general is a way of thinking about your constraints. But constraints only from infinite possibility, right? So that's the way to think about it. So that's it, folks. That's I would say the 3 big changes which we covered. And then, these small changes. Anybody's any questions about any of these, then I'm happy to answer it with the time that I've got left.
Thank you very much, Chris. That was very insightful. We have quite a few questions from the audience. I'll start with Keith. He has 2 questions for you. ETA on 5.0. And the second question is, do most organizations have an explicit agreement in their adoption? That means they automatically change which version of the Constitution they adhere to when a new Constitution version comes out.
Cool. One ETA, I don't know, but let me give you a more satisfying answer. So I don't know for sure, but so my guess would be, let's say, what is my guess? Okay, so here's what's going on in my head, Keith. my sense is a few months, let's say 4 months, kind of at most, I think, for maybe 6. So 6 months at most to kind of get the Constitution, just that document done. At which point, I'm not exactly sure what the rollout will be. My sense is just saying, you know, kind of throwing the document at people is not going to be all that helpful. So my goal would be to have like a more user-friendly tool. So 6 months it might be done, but I'm not sure if it'll be public then. So sometime after that, I would say. And then, do most organizations have an explicit agreement in their adoption? I do not know. I actually don't have any idea. Do I have any idea? I don't know, but I haven't come across that, like an automatic explicit agreement that says we will automatically update. If you have other data, I'm almost kind of curious where that question's coming from. It makes me think maybe you have seen that or you've heard that. I haven't come across that myself, generally because I think I've only been around since 4 and 4.1, which was a small change. So I haven't had as much, experience kind of going from one to the other. That's the best I could do on that one. Should I just, oh, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you so much. The second one is from Patricia, who is giving projects to role supporter, role lead, or he creates them by himself?
It would be role lead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, making requests, a role supporter. Yep.
Cool, thank you.
Exactly.
And third question from Johnny or Yoni, I'm sorry if I don't pronounce it right. In our organization, some people only have multi-field roles. Most of them would then be role supporters and do not get a role lead. I can imagine they'll see this as a step back and be worker bees again. And the question is, how would you handle such a situation?
Yeah, well, I can kind of maybe clarify something. And this is where, I mean, almost the entire presentation could have just been on role leads and role supporters because it's nuanced. So I'm gonna do my best to answer it. So first, it's actually not the case that if you have a multi-field role that there will only be one role lead and then everyone else will be a role supporter. No, it's also possible for all those others to be role leads. That's fine. It's no different in that sense than the way it is now. Again, it's just like what we would normally just call a role, we'll now call like a role lead if that's what they're doing. And that may be fine. You may have 4 role leads and you could even still have a focus. All of that still applies. And if that's working fine, no reason to change it. And maybe if anything, the opposite effect, instead of it kind of feeling like a step backwards, being a role lead might feel a little bit better. And if there was some, of course, reason someone wanted to not have all of the responsibilities of the role, but had some capacity and was willing to energize some of the work in support of others, then they may choose, they have an option now to go that route. Whereas before they only have in the role, out of the role, or create some weird, other version of the role. Kind of customized for themselves. So that's my answer to that. It's a good question, though. It's one of the first questions I had.
Thank you. And finally, do you have a situation when one agreement was against another one?
No, haven't come across it. Haven't come across that. In theory, though, it should be pretty, I don't know. Yeah, just like anything else. If you're talking about the working agreements, again, the working agreements, I would say, are almost, again, kind of like lightly held. They can be changed at any time. The point of them is not to, manipulate or, make people do stuff. The point is actually to kind of use the power of clear, conscious decision-making without being in battle or in the throes of reactions or emotions, to say, yes, that agreement makes sense to me, so I'm going to agree to that. In that situation, I'll agree to that. And then now if I find myself in the heat of battle and I'm having some reaction, well, now there is a more neutral way for someone else or for myself to recognize, oh, wait a minute, though, I've agreed, right? Because I think it makes sense, actually, to kind of to do this differently. Right, to take this kind of action despite how I may just want to react. And that gives me a chance to kind of reflect, maybe ultimately, that agreement that didn't make sense, and there's a good case, and so I need to update it or just change it, what have you. But in that sense, it's not unlike how governance really works for role-to-role kind of interactions, right? It's a place there. It's the places you should go because hopefully things have been clarified enough. But that doesn't mean that they always, will be. It's going to be constantly evolving, as tensions surface.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you guys for all your questions. Please keep on posting during our third presentation. Now I would like to welcome Bartłomiej Żdek-Tomecki from Boldare. Bartek, would you like to connect with us?
Yeah, I'm there.
Thanks. Thank you. And Bartek is a former front-end developer here at Boldare, and with Holacracy transformation, he started filling multiple roles, serving as a Holacracy adoption lead and leading of a product design and development circle. He has worked with development processes, improvements, and standards, moving organization to the self-organization and Holacracy. Tonight, Bartek will talk about Holacracy 5.0 and why you might be already there. Welcome, Bartek.
Okay, hello. I hope that you hear me well and see me well. So I will try to share my presentation. Please shout if you want to see it. Okay, I hope that that you can see it, and okay, let's start. I want to say about why you might already be in the Holacracy 5.0, or maybe why we are not there as a Boldare, but we really want to be there. Because what was the story about the Holacracy Constitution and our company? We heard about the Holacracy Forum event maybe a month ago, and we were thinking that it would be the boring event. We'll discuss what changed. Maybe we will move those words here. We will change a bit this word, etc. But it came that it's really huge changes, and thanks again, Chris, for sharing with us the big changes. But I want to focus on the one different aspect of the Holacracy Constitution, which I think it's also the important thing which changed here. Because I want to share with you the story of our organization and what's our big problem right now. Because almost a year after a transformation, with almost all employees developed as a Holacracy circles, we have some practice how to do it and how to work in the new environment. But also it stopped us with so many things that worked before the Holacracy. Basically, the main problem that our circles became as silos for our roles, for our work, for where we are working, with whom we are working. So one of those problems in details. So we are, for example, waiting for tactical meeting to act. We are not working besides the tactical meetings. We are working within circles we are in. We don't act as the collaboration between the circles dropped really. Also, the working alone with my projects and accountabilities, this is another problem where I suppose that when I am filling the roles, I have the project, I have the accountability. That means that I need to do it by myself. So shortly, those are the main problems we are struggling right now, and we want to beat it. And I think that Holacracy Constitution 5.0 gives us the new tools, or at least the mindset in which we are going to move to deal with it. because I want to share with you and the thoughts about how to work with Holacracy Constitution 5.0. First is the tactical meeting, and you can see the comparison of those two sentences. On the right, you have the new from Holacracy 5.0. On the left, you can see the current one. So now we have the secretary of a circle is responsible for scheduling a regular tactical meeting. And what's going on, what will come in the few months, that any partner may convene a tactical meeting. So this is a huge change that not for us, that emphasis that everyone in the circle can create a meeting, can gather the people and resolve their problems. It's not only the thing that you have tactical meetings once a week and you have to do it only then. You can gather the people, gather the roles they are needed, not necessarily the whole circle, and resolve your problems with those people, with those roles. And it can be only one tactical meetings and never happen again in this with those roles. It's not necessarily need to be regular scheduled tactical meeting. Because what I also want to point out that in the maturity map of Holacracy, our goal for the tactical meetings is that tactical meetings are used purely as a fallback. Most operational needs are met outside the meetings or in ad hoc meetings. So in my opinion, previously or in the current constitution, there was mismatch between this goal and the tactical meeting sentence that they must be once a week, scheduled by secretary, and so on. So in my opinion, it's more fluid, and it follows the goal where we are going, right? Another thing related to the tactical meeting and how the operations between the role fillers and between the roles are. Again, on the right, the new, on the left, the current one. Now you have the following duties to your fellow circle members, and in the Constitution 5.0 you have the same duties and responsibilities. Maybe refine something as Chris said, but you have those duties to all other roles in the organization. So we are not closed in the one circle. We are operating in the ecosystem of the whole organization. We can't close only to our circle and work only within this. I think also this is the big change in the mindset of people who fill the roles in the Holacracy. Because this gives you the authority also to require from the roles from the other circles, also to invite them to the meetings, to give them the projects, to talk with them directly, not via the cross links, rep links, etc. So it's great again. One of those new duties is the transparency, because from Constitution 5.0 you must share a brief summary of progress you've made towards an accountability or project of one of your roles, and it's not only limited to the tactical meeting. Anyone in the organization may ask you about the progress updates, about any project, about your roles, accountabilities, etc. As I said further, it may be regularly for the specific accountability or project. So you are obligated to do it if they request differently, or you will say that are no longer relevant or useful. So again, the Holacracy constitutions move to the meaning that work is not only on the tactical meetings, because those rules of transparency, of progress updates, of what you are doing, why, and how long, it may be anywhere outside of the meeting in correlation with any other role filler or any other role. Again, the same you can see in the rep link, because the rep link's role also will change a bit differently, but I think that this change is also meaningful, because now each circle normally elects a rep link to its support circle. And in the Constitution 5.0, any circle member of a circle may call for the selection of a rep link. So it's not obligation to have a rep link. As Brian said on the Holacracy forum, if the circle or the role find another way to make their work transparent for the organization, they can use it. They don't need the rep link to go with updates, with metrics, with accountability to the support circle. So it's not needed, but if you feel that is the best way to present the progress, you may call for the selection. And this is also the example from our company. When it comes to the metrics, we are trying to also create the automated spreadsheets, automated metrics that they don't need people to explain what's going on there, to update them. The good metric is when everyone can open it and see what's going on there without pinging anyone who need to add something, explain, calculate something. It gives you the full transparency, and you don't need to have wait for the tactical meeting, because also there could be a problem when rep links is absent for our tactical meetings. So who will present this metric? Who know what's going on there? And it seems that without rep links, nobody knows most often. So I guess that gives also every role filler the obligation that he must present what's going on there with his role, his project. He must give updates, not only wait for rep link to do it. And one more thing that is also important for me, when it comes to the Holacracy 5.0, this is the issue that is still open. As Chris said, there will be a couple of months when the new document will be ready. So there are still some open issues on the GitHub, and you can see what needs work, and there are also some question labels, so you can say what do you think about those changes and participate in it. So one of these still open issues is allow forming circles that cross-cut the hierarchy, and I think it's quite big and also very important issues, because in our organization we are thinking where we can start the implementation. I mean, what is the main purpose of people, of employees, and what is the purpose around which we should form the circle. And the reality is not that simple, that we have only one dimension which we can create circles. For example, we have developers in cross-functional agile teams that works for their clients. So in one team you have backend developers, front-end developers, designers, testers, QAs, engineers, etc. So main purpose of those sub-circles are serving for the client, serving for the products, and this is their main purpose, to build the best product for them. But also there's a second dimension of the cooperation, because each PHP developer from each circle, they can gather and, for example, establish some standards of writing PHP code. It has nothing to do with client or with the products, or at least not so much. But I imagine that they also can gather and give the authority, for example, to decide how to write the code, how to write tests, and how to manage the code, not inside the circle, which the purpose is to serving the client and build the best product. But those standards can be do also in those crosscut circles. So I think it's really big change, and I'm really looking forward to see how it looks like, because I don't know how it looks like in the system like Glassfork or Holacracy. I'm very curious when I will be able to see it. Yeah, but for me this is the big change. But all those changes are getting in the same direction. I mean that you can act not only inside your circle, you can act in the whole organization. You can gather the people for one meeting, for any roles you want. You might think that are helpful to resolve your problem, and just work with them for one issue, two issues, and then just go back to your circles. I think this is the big change to the spirit of the Holacracy, because we are not and the interpretation of the Holacracy, and this is why we at Boldare we are really excited for the direction when the interpretation of Holacracy is going, because this is our direction. Because we were used to cross-functional agile teams and solving problems together, and we feel that those exact splitting accountability, splitting to the circles, finished with those silos across different circles and different accountabilities and roles. And this encouraged us to work more on this area, because, for example, we are still often gathering people and from different circles and for a meeting, and we have a question: is this the Holacracy meeting or not? If we are supposed to do a regular tactical or maybe other form, what kind of meeting this is? This is we are breaking the Holacracy or not? And with those changes, which we can see now in the constitution, we can see that this is not breaking the rules, and we really like it. So. One more thing that I really enjoy in the Holacracy constitution, that it evolves. It's not set in stone once for forever, but this is the basic rules when you can cooperate and use it for build your own tools. For example, as Chris said, Holacracy will not give you all the tools and possibilities to work in the organization. You have to do a lot more things. And this is the cool thing, that you have the possibility to actually to experiment, to try some tools, some solutions, and try if it's going on, if it works well or not. And maybe also because the Holacracy Constitution is open source project, you are able also to propose your solution as in the next Holacracy version. So who knows, maybe it will be added. We didn't add anything, but I hope that maybe someday we will also have we'll be also participating in the creating of Holacracy Constitution. Yeah, so basically that's all what I wanted to say and share with you. Let me stop the screen sharing.
Thank you so much, Bartek, for your presentation. We have a question from Ivo. He asks, don't you think that the new rep link rule, not mandatory, is depowering? The rep link, I personally like the check and balance between lead and rep link.
Yeah, you may be right in the this balance between lead link and rep link. All the power and authority is in the one person, but with all other changes, like for example that you have the duty to transparently show what's the progress and what's going on in your role, projects, metrics, etc., and also that they may be multiple role fillers, so multiple also lead links or now circle leads. It gives you also the possibility to split this authority, and I'm not afraid that, because every time you can write a policy that explicitly requires a rep link for every circle. So it's when you see that it may happen, it may be dangerous, you can always set a policy which will prevent this.
Thank you. And one more question from Patricia. How do you see having transparency without rep link on tactical?
I can see it as the ideal. For example, we have the one spreadsheet which automatically gets the data from somewhere and just show it, calculate, show it, and that's it. You can just see what's going on there without asking, and so what is more important that without remembering that I need to update this metrics or show it on the tactical meeting. I think also this could be the accountability split in somewhere in the role, because it might be helpful for you, for role fillers, to choose how they will present it and who will be responsible. Because I'm not afraid that it will damage something. I can see possibilities for the circles or roles to choose how they want to present the data, present the updates, and to choose the best way for they.
Thank you so much, Bartek. And I just wanted to share with you a few words of a summary. So today, here, in my opinion, three key takeaways. As Sascha underlined, to avoid going into hierarchy and this hierarchical understanding of Holacracy 5.0, we need to make a stand for a good organizational culture and support tribe space and empower people. Chris discussed a big three in 5.0. In his opinion, role leads and role supporters, working agreements, and finally, lead link no longer equals budgets and money. New Holacracy constitutions will be more flexible, more human, and more distributed. Finally, Bartek made the point that the new Holacracy constitution is about operating in an ecosystem that is a whole organization, and we can't close in one circle. Thank you all for joining us during the webinar. We really appreciate all your active participation, all the questions and comments you've posted, especially thanks to tonight's speakers who shared their insights with us. This week, you'll receive an email summary of the webinar, including all three presentations. The video from the webinar will be published on our Boldare YouTube channel. The link will be also included in the email summary. We hope you learned a thing or two about Holacracy 5.0 and the new constitution. On the final note, please follow us on LinkedIn. The address is linkedin.com/company/Holacracy-practitioners-meetup, where we post all updates regarding all our meetup sessions. We hope to see you soon at the next webinar. Thank you so much. Good night.